Now this hour we're going to be looking at the experience of parents, mums and dads, looking after their children and their babies and looking after themselves. And I'm very delighted that I've got two fantastic speakers who are going to share their knowledge and their expertise with us. We're kind of focusing a little bit on perinatal mental health, and particularly initially the first one on dads. And dads sometimes get a bit neglected. I'm sure Mark's going to say this, but they're an important part of the family unit. And if dad's feeling anxious or depressed, that can impact on mum. It can also impact if mum's depressed on dad. So we need to look at the whole family together. And by supporting dads, we support mums and the growing family and the developing family. So I'm really delighted that Mark's with us this evening. Mark Williams, and many of you will know Mark. He was awarded the Inspirational Father of the Year at the Pride of Britain Awards. Pretty impressive, but shows how far he has come since the birth of his son in 2004, Ethan. Or Ethan?
Ethan, yeah.
Ethan,
that's it.
And you say it much more beautifully. And he's come through, and his whole CV, and both CVs are online, and there's a lot more. I'm just giving edited highlights. He's had a career in sales management and training, and he became involved in mental health sector after his wife, Michelle, had experience with postnatal depression and birth trauma, and his own experience with depression following the birth of his child. Now, he's spoken at conferences and study days, and he's published very widely on the topic. Some of those are on the reference list. Oh, there's a book, one's a book, and one's a report that he's recently published. So I'm really so delighted he's with us this evening. So welcome, Mark. Now the screen is all yours, and you've already got it.
Yeah. Hi guys, hope you're all okay. Most importantly, you're okay. Like you said, I'm known for fathers, but actually campaign for all parents really. And he started the campaign for the mother baby unit in Wales. And as you know, hopefully that's going to come back this year. So that closed in 2013. So I believe that if you support all parents for their mental health, it just has far better outcomes for the whole family and that child's development. So like Sue said, I come from a lived experience first, and then working with parents, and also working with Dr. Jane Handley. And with that mix, I've got the knowledge of the parents as well, you know, which is vital. So my story starts like from all parents have a past history of anxiety or depression, you know, and mine was undiagnosed with ADHD before when I was in school. So I had an undiagnosed disorder, and I struggled and self-managed that all my life. I was only diagnosed at 40 years of age. So I was pretty successful in sales. I didn't know nothing about mental health, totally didn't know nothing about mental health. So after 22 hours labor, I remember the doctors came rushing in and they said, Mr. Williams, your wife needs emergency C-section. And it was the first time I actually had a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack like that ever since. And when I went into the labor ward and what I witnessed, it was horrific. And, you know, seeing my wife, and I honestly thought my wife and baby was going to die in that situation. And I've worked in secure units. I witnessed really bad things in my life, but still to this day, nothing was worse thinking my wife and baby was going to die, because I felt out of control. I felt helplessness. Michelle went on to have severe post-depression, where she was in crisis team. But we realized now there's an overlap between PTSD from the symptoms, which actually goes into the postnatal period. So a lot of mums and dads, well, dads now as well, you know, if you witness or experience a life-threatening event, that is PTSD. So PTSD is an anxiety disorder, either witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. And then we know some of the symptoms, severe symptoms, which is nightmares, flashbacks. But like I said, it's an anxiety disorder. So my personality totally changed in the first year of fatherhood. I couldn't tell my wife how I was starting to feel, because my wife is in crisis team. I didn't want to impact on her mental health. I went from, you know, expecting to be back in work in 2 weeks, self-employed. It took me 6 months to get back in work. And even then, I weren't the same person, because when I went back into sales, tried to get back into sales, I couldn't take the pressures anymore. And all of a sudden, we talk about isolation. For me personally, I've never felt so isolated in the first year of fatherhood. I didn't initially bond with my son initially, but I think that bond and attachment grew because, as we know, when that's skin to skin, it can release oxytocin, which is good for the baby and dads as well. So all these things I was doing, which I didn't know about, because when my wife unfortunately was unwell in bed, it was only me and my son Ethan. So my bond attachment did really grow really quick. And I'm pleased to say he's doing well, fantastic now in school and stuff. But going back to that experience, my personality totally changed in that first year of fatherhood. I remember punching a sofa, bust my hand. As we know, a lot of men suppress those feelings, and that comes out in all sorts of ways sometimes as well. So I was using alcohol as a coping skill. I was luckily, there's a lot of families haven't got that family support. So my mother-in-law came to live with us, and that helped so much. And I have my own family, but I couldn't tell him how I was starting to feel because I didn't want the attention taken away from my wife either. So I struggled on for years. And like I said, I've written a book about it, which explains more. And the most important thing I want to share with you tonight is actually the research, which shows why we should be supporting all parents for their mental health as well. We know the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. And yet we know now there's high risk of suicide in new fathers. But like me, because there was no screening on early prevention support in place, a lot of men will get diagnosed with anxiety or depression after the perinatal period. And as a mental health advocate, I used to come across mums who had PTSD or post-depression from years ago. And when I met them in the secure units, nobody had either asked them or screened them. But we know perinatal mental health has certainly come a long way in the last 10 years, I would definitely say, because a lot of people used to say postnatal depression or baby blues, but we know perinatal mental health is the big umbrella. So my experience basically changed when I was actually working in the youth sector. I started changing my local youth club, and it was a lot of young suicides in Bridgend, the area. So I started educating myself more about mental health. I started going into the sector, but I still didn't get the help during that period because I thought if I went to the doctors, it'd be on my notes and I would never get a job in mental health. So I suppressed those feelings, and eventually I lost my grandfather, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer in a short space of time. And then a timeline of trauma, basically, I just couldn't cope anymore. Now, I was physically fit during this time. I was doing a lot of kickboxing at the time, but mentally, it was actually impacting on my physical health, pins and needles, all these aches and pains. And what really changed my life was meeting a gentleman in the gym. And I was working in a hospital called T. Catherine at the time. And he said, can I bother weights? I said, yeah. I got to go to NHS Prams, he said. And I said, oh, what's NHS Prams? And he said, oh, my wife's got postnatal depression. And I said, oh my gosh, my wife had postnatal depression too. And within 5 minutes, side by side, because I feel men talk better side by side, and that's why a lot of people are doing walk and talk groups now as well. I told him more things in 5 minutes than I told my best friends and my wife, because he related to me, understood. I didn't feel that he was going to be any judgment. And back then, it was a bigger stigma than it is now. I think mental health has gone, more awareness has grown, more people are talking about it, I would say in the last 4 years. But certainly back when I started, it was certainly, fathers with postnatal depression, it was a even bigger stigma. So postnatal depression, when you look at all the evidence and research and ask any professor in the field, there's no really strong evidence that it is hormonal. That is one of the factors that possibly, yes, it is. But there's a testosterone change in fathers during this time as well. But some of the risk factors, as we know, is fathers with undiagnosed disorders like bipolar, schizophrenia, ASD, ADHD, they self-managing that. Then the lack of sleep. As we know, the lack of sleep can even cause psychosis as well. If you sleep is so important to your mental health. And then if you witness a traumatic birth, or some fathers I speak to go for a loss, and as midwives, you know what parents go through, and yet they don't get that support. And I even spoke to somebody today, a lady, where she had lots of support for a loss of a child, but the father would never ask for his mental health, nothing. And that can impact the mum's mental health. And so many relationships can fail because of this as well. So when I said a father's reaching out, it was only to support fathers with their partners with postnatal depression. But what was happening, the mums would phone me up and say, Mark, I'm fine, but my husband is struggling since the birth of my son or daughter. Can he come to the group? So after sharing my own experience, the fathers were talking about all sorts of things, which I didn't know about either. So I was lucky to start working with Dr. Jane Handley then in 2011. And then Jane was educating me. We were talking about paternal OCD. Now, paternal OCD, like dads and mums, they get the intrusive thoughts they can do something to the baby. They take themselves out of the situation and then they go down the pub. You know, dads don't change the nappy for reasons. The thoughts they get in, sometimes they've been abused in a bath. It could be from past history. So there's loads of reasons. So what we got to look at is, why are men behaving like they are sometimes as well? Because like I said, in my work I've done with parents, I found parents that, or dads, who actually the relationship have failed. Then there's all sorts of problems with relationships. It could be a lack of sex, because the fact is that the father's gone through witnessing a trauma or seeing a partner's go through a crisis, and then he doesn't want to have sex with his partner again because he doesn't want another baby. And that's my experience, because I didn't want to have another child. Prior to that, I wanted to have 3 children, you know. So the relationship is really important to get the communication with parents together as well, because, you know, when mum's going for a vulnerable time and thinking, oh, my partner doesn't want sex with me, sometimes the father doesn't want to have sex with a partner because the simple fact he doesn't want her to go for that trauma. Antenatal is so important as well, which is not talked about in fathers. So if you've got a father like myself, or if, say, Michelle become pregnant, and now my anxiety now is going to be higher in the antenatal period, because now I've got to go into a labour ward where I witnessed that trauma. And as we know, a smell can trigger off that trauma as well. The other thing as well is important to know that communication is vital as well. We need to communicate as well with, because some dads, they just want to have a chat and tell them the process. You know, emergency C-section used to be used. It was CAP 1, 2, 3 now. You know, emergency. So if you've got a dad on the ASD spectrum and you've got noises going off, and somebody says emergency C-section, and, you know, somebody saying, oh, say goodbye to your wife as she's getting rushed down the theatre, in his mind, he's overthinking, and he's thinking that his wife. So communication and preparing dads is vital as well. That's most importantly. So postnatal depression in fathers, that's the big thing. You know, we know by research, it's actually 1 in 10, but we know it's far higher because it was 1 in 10 for years for mums. But once we start screening and getting the data in place, that's when we know how high it is, because up to 39% of fathers were concerned about their mental health. And that's the Mental Health Foundation, 2018. 38% of fathers were concerned about worried about their mental health. That's the NTT report. That's all in my report I showed. And one thing what I did started to do was start to raise awareness. Oh, my slides are stuck. 1 second. So I started raising awareness on TV and radio stations, because I thought I needed to get this out there to educate people that it does happen to a father, any fathers, for any groups. So going back to what I was saying about the reports as well, November did a report, and I said that 1 in 5 British fathers felt they lost connections with their best friends during the first year of fatherhood. So we know by the evidence now what's coming out as well. And one of the things I've done in this report, so you can all access this report as well, because I know Julia's speaking later on, so I want to make sure Julia gets time. It's probably the hardest thing to do a 15-minute talk, because I could talk about this. So I'm trying to get as much information as I can in 15 minutes. But if you look at the report, it gets all the evidence in our report as well. And that's from professors, doctors from around the world. And we want to an inquiry and embrace report inquiry, because we feel that we don't know how many fathers go on to take their lives during the perinatal period as well, and afterwards as well. And even though that John Clayton, an academic, he had PhD, and his wife did a lot of awareness around this during his time, and he threw a party and he took his life. He died through suicide. So once we start, more men are talking about mental health now, we'll feel that there'll be more fathers be talking about their mental health as well. And I know a couple of people like Scott a couple of people I can share with you are doing some amazing things as well, and that's why we need other fathers to speak out about it. So part of the report, MBI rates are higher in dads as well than non-fathers. When you look at the child line in men, depression is up to 20% or more than non-fathers, if that makes sense as well. So, and like I said, what happens is then with when they do get that help, they only get certain treatment, talking therapies. With PTSD, and sometimes those treatments are different as well. So the biggest thing that happens as well, as we know, with adverse childhood experiences as well, if we support both parents with their mental health, we can actually lower adverse childhood experiences. The other factors that comes in as well, what I want to say is, sorry, my chain of thought just went then, sorry, Bess, my chain of thought just went then, sorry. I would recommend you look at the still face experiment on dads. And that's why, so my work is, it is known for fathers, but it's all about parents really. If we can support both parents in the antenatal period, then it has far better outcomes for the whole family and that child's development as well. We know fatherhood is totally changed now as well. So there's more stay-at-home dads, there's single dads, and we got to talk about same gender parents as well, which is being missed. So even though I'm known for fathers, I'm not just fathers, I'm parents really. And you have a look at the Equality Act in 2010. I feel in years to come, we'll be looking back at this thinking, why didn't we look at fathers? Why do we include fathers in and why didn't they not get the help that other parents or mums are getting? Because like I've said, the mums phone me up mostly and say, Mark, I'm fine. But my husband's mental health or partner's mental health is actually impacting on my mental health. So what happens when I got depressed and had a breakthrough? My wife's depression came back then because now she was caring for me and worried about me. So if we can get a more holistic approach early on, it can save services. It can, you know, the economic report on the Maternal Mental Health Alliance says mum and baby. You know, it doesn't include dad. But what I'm saying is, when you look at that economic report, there's a cost factor. But the most importantly, I know it can lower suicide rates in men, because a lot of men, we know that's higher because of stigma. And I know the stigma coming from Bridgend Valleys is a lot of men will drink themselves to death. They will smash the car up. So that's only recorded as an act of suicide. We know it's far higher than that as well. Sorry, how am I doing for time? Sorry, am I okay? I'm okay, sorry for that. So yeah, that's the joys of working in the Arctic. I should have put a clock up here, sorry, apologise. But going back what I was saying, so like I said, if dad is supported and prepared as well, then, you know, and feels confident, then like I said, that can really improve the child's development. So I give an example is if mum has been at work all day, dad's come home and he hasn't had that practice of changing nappy, and unintentionally when the parents may say, oh, give me the nappy here, or give me the baby, you're too slow. Even little things like that can actually not engage dads, and dads move away. So we have to engage fathers in the antenatal, you know, antenatal classes for dads. The other thing I want to share with you as well is the OCD is a big factor, but out of everything, I feel birth trauma is huge, big, massive. And there's a video I did with Michelle O'Dent and on BBC. It's on called Dads in a Labour Ward. Please have a look at that. And I think out of all the work I've done, more I think of it now, because my wife, even though Michelle was diagnosed with severe postnatal depression, when she did get that specialist support later on, it was a lot to do. When they did the timeline of trauma, it was a birth experience was the most traumatic out of everything. And what I witnessed, I was, you know, I used to wake up thinking my wife and baby had died. I'd have thoughts, not so much like some fathers I speak to, and even things, you know, can trigger off, like I said, you know. So, you know, I've had support, but we need other fathers as well to share their experience and give them the permission, because it's a big myth that men don't talk, massive myth. If you put fathers in a safe place who somebody understands and give them that time. I know from experience, men don't shut up. Honestly, they will carry on and carry on. And once they do open up, like myself, it's like a genie bottle. You can't stop talking about it then. But I think we've come a long way in mental health in general and perinatal mental health as well. But like you said, I want to give Julia obviously time to speak as well. So please have a look at the report as well. And it's got loads of information on there. And actually got a film coming out now in March. So I'm hoping that will help parents as well. And so, you know, if you want any information, please just let me know as well.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.